it stops being affordable, because how do you sell a house that is on public land to a citizen? You can only lease it, but you can't sell it. Okay? So now this private sector guy now will go and source for land and is able to recover his money. So what they did, and during that time for guys who were in Kenya, remember we had a lot of what is called off-plan housing. And it was marketed even in the diaspora. It was marketed in Kenya, where you go and tell a Kenyan, I have a plan for you. This is an off-plan. We are going to build an estate, or we are going to build a 3-bedroom house. It will cost you X. And because of the scale, anytime you do something on scale, the cost of production comes down. So that, to me, that's how government should have done it, because that is how Uhuru did it. He was able to leverage on scale. When you do something in large scale, the cost will always come down. It is always expensive to produce in small quantities. It becomes cheaper when you go large scale. So the government should have done an off-plan kind of business, whereby if a Kenyan feels they want that house, then the Kenyan buy the house. But now people are asking, so you're cutting me the housing levy, but I already have a house. So you're making me build a house that I'll never get to own. That is stealing in actual sense. By every definition of the word, that is stealing. So when it comes to housing, I feel we should have had the private sector funding. And when Ruto came into power, the examples were all over. We had this guy who was running for governor in Mombasa. He did the biggest housing project, I think, in Kenya. He did it in Mombasa. That's an individual. Kabogo did a housing project in Kiambu, though his was high end. We have companies like we have two companies that are very popular in Kiambu. I'm trying to Kenyatta Road. We have two companies that are very popular on Kenyatta Road, and people in diaspora and Kenyans buy those houses. And the cost, I remember, I actually happened to onboard on one. You were getting it was a 3-bedroom house with an SQ for 4.5. If you did the math yourself to build the same house, it would come to more than that. So this government has the right idea, but wrong execution. As I learned, I'll tell you, if you look at what they did in Manhattan, when after World War II, this is when urban areas saw it necessary to do affordable housing for its citizens. So you look at what happened in the US and closely look at what has happened in China. What they did is you allocate land as government and you buy that land from the private sector. Then you bring the developer in and tell them, we want you to do bed sitters here, because it did not make sense to me that we were doing 4-bedroom houses in Dwake. The people in Dwake cannot afford those houses. You get? So government needed to look at the area first and say, are we going to do a high rise? And in some areas, do we use stone or do we use bricks? You know, if you go to Uganda, people do housing using mud bricks. Why was I, particularly when someone asked me about it, I said, when you do bricks, mud bricks, which is used largely in Uganda, you go to Rwanda, that's what people use. What are you doing? You also create employment downstream, because you have young people making those bricks. Then they bring those bricks to the site. Then the people in the site use the bricks. So affordable housing should have been divided in terms of, if you're doing it in an area where when you do your research, you have the mean income of this area is pegged at this price, then that area should have guided you to say, here we are going to do prefabricated houses. Why? Because it will bring the cost down. In another area, you're going to do brick houses. Store it, but bricks. Because that is what the people in that area can afford. And the reason we have so many ghost houses in Kenya, we have so many houses, but people cannot buy them, is because people in that locality cannot afford that house. So it stops becoming affordable to them. So for me, I feel it should have been done differently. Government should have not have put its money, or government should have not gone and forced people. It should have been a willing buyer, willing seller arrangement, where government tells the private sector, we are going to put incentives for you, build the houses, sell it to Kenyans. Then Kenyans will onboard as they go forward. So even if a Kenyan wanted to buy 4 houses in one area, let them. Safaricom has done it. They have a very big housing project in in Mavoko, Safaricom has numerous houses and they are very affordable. I feel that is how we should have gone as a country. But this thing of getting into the pockets of people, you tax people, then at some point you say the money we've collected for housing now is going to be converted into something that is not even in housing. That's why Kenyans feel robbed for me. And this mentality of forcing people into something that you're going to go into housing whether you want it or not. We believe it is good for you. You're going to go into Chief and Shah whether you want it or not. We believe it is good for you. That chest thumping is what is making people resist this government, because you can't force people to do what they don't want. You convince people that what we have is a good idea. And because human beings are creatures of logic, a good idea will always carry the day, and people will on board and people will buy those houses. For me, that should have been the approach government took, instead of saying it's a must. Those are my thoughts, Real Joe and Maggie and John.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Actually, you said something. You said something that is very critical, and this is just. I mean, do you know how many affordable houses? There's actually the government has been unable to sell these quote unquote affordable houses. Right now, we have coming to a value of about 1.5 billion. The government is unable to sell. Money has already been used in construction, but the government is unable to sell them. And just like you've said, because the people of that locality are unable to afford those houses. And Anton, you have something. I can see your mic is on. Yes. Anthony? Okay. Yeah. So the government is unable currently to sell these houses that they have already constructed to a tune of 1.5 billion. And if you look at it, they are hell-bent on constructing these houses at all cost. But, and I mean, Kenyans should forget about the houses, because the president himself, in an interview, said, I mean, the housing program is not about the houses. It is about the jobs. So Kenyans should just forget about these houses and think about the jobs that the president is talking about, quote in quotes, in the affordable housing sector. So Kenyans should forget those houses. Anyway, yeah. So that's what we are discussing today. So if you're joining us, the question today is how affordable is affordable housing? And if you want to speak, you can take over. You can request the mic and give your submissions on this. A lot of us feel that this project should have been devolved, considering that our constitution brought in the concept of devolution. So a lot of us think that this should have been devolved rather than being handled by the national government single-handedly. Anthony feels that the government should have allowed the private sectors. I think I also feel that to some extent the private sector should have been involved in the developing of the houses, affordable houses. But the most important for me is this should have been devolved. This should have been devolved. And the county governments now run the housing projects in their respective counties with the support of the national government. John Seremani talked about money being collected for housing, the one that has been deducted from Kenyans in formal employment, now being used, being invested in treasury bills. And this is a problem. And do you know, like I said, IMF just recently uncovered something about these treasury bills. The banks go to the central bank. The central bank normally gives them loans at a very cheap rate, at a very low rate. Let me not say use the word cheap. Cheap is not the right word. At a very low rate to cushion them. They then take this money and invest the money on treasury bills. And currently, taxpayers are paying 2.1 billion a day to treasury, to those who have invested in treasury bills. And I think when someone saw a loophole there, decided to invest money meant for affordable houses in the treasury bills. But yeah, Wanjiru, you are here now. I'll invite you to the mic and give us your submissions on the same.
Thank you so much, Liljo. Well, I think my sentiments are equal to what we said. Someone said earlier that the housing project should have been devolved. Each county should have been allocated money to build its own housing project. But as you also said, Mr. Ruto also said the main purpose or the sole purpose of the housing project is to create jobs. And that's a question arises. What happens like right now if no more buildings are being built? What does it mean is it even logical to even go on media and say the whole purpose of affordable housing is creating jobs? What if all the houses are built? What if the national government builds all the houses? Does it mean, is it why people are getting imported to Qatar for jobs? Because now houses are almost getting finished, be built, and now we are going to face a mass unemployment. I think it's just a crazy thing. Like, you can build a house for the high-rise building and whatever,